The Winchester rifle shook in her hands as the heavy tread of footsteps echoed on the wooden porch. There were 2 men, maybe 3. Leanne pressed her back against the rough-hewn cabin wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Mai's wedding dress, a delicate silk cheongsam, still hung behind her like a ghost in red and gold. A voice, slick and dangerous, called out, "We know you're in there, pretty lady." For 10 long years, Josiah Blackwood had lived alone on this sprawling Wyoming range, faithful to the memory of his dead wife. 10 years of silence and solitude until 3 weeks ago, when her sister had appeared at his door. She arrived with eyes the color of strong tea and secrets that could destroy them both. Now, those same eyes stared down the barrel of a gun, waiting for the man who had sworn never to love again. The door splintered inward. Would he reach her in time? And what price would their forbidden desire demand? The year was 1887, and the Wyoming Territory still belonged to men who measured their worth in cattle and the endless miles of fence line they strung across the prairie. Josiah Blackwood was one of them, a towering figure of weathered leather and silent grief, working 100 head of cattle on 40,000 acres of grass that stretched to a lonely horizon. His hands told the story of his life, the deep rope burns, the jagged scars from barbed wire, the thick calluses of a man who had built everything twice, once with hope and once with stubbornness. Mai had died 10 winters past, lost to a fever that swept through during a blizzard. He kept her things exactly where she had left them. The red silk dress hung in the wardrobe, her jade comb rested on the dresser, still holding a single strand of her black hair. The bed they had shared was cold now, lying under quilts that smelled of sandalwood and regret. Other ranchers' wives brought him pies, and their daughters found flimsy excuses to ride past his property line, their intentions clear. But Josiah Blackwood had loved once, completely and fiercely, and when that love was extinguished in a February storm, something vital within him had died too. Letters arrived monthly from her family in San Francisco, checking on dear Josiah, though they had never approved of their daughter marrying a rough American cowboy. He burned them all, unread, until the one that came in October. The words, penned by Mai's mother, were stark. Leanne is in trouble. She has run from an engagement to Alastair Finch, you know, the banking family. She has talked of nothing but finding the peace Mai wrote about in Wyoming. If she comes to you, please, do not turn her away. She has nowhere else to go. Yours, Margaret Wong. He had burned that one too, but the words lingered, clinging to him like smoke as the first November snows began to fall. The night she arrived, he was out mending a fence by lamplight. When he rode back toward the cabin, a soft yellow glow bloomed in the windows against the encroaching darkness, the first light his home had seen after sunset in a decade. He found her sitting at Mai's kitchen table, reading from Mai's small, leather-bound journal. Josiah stood frozen in the doorway, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. She had the same raven black hair, the same delicate hands, the same way of tilting her head as she read. But where Mai had been quiet water, this woman was a restless flame. "You're Leanne," he said, his voice a low rasp. She looked up, and her eyes were a deep, rich brown where Mai's had been a softer shade, almost black. Different, but achingly familiar. "I'm sorry for letting myself in." The door was unlocked. "Doors don't need locks out here," he said, stepping inside. He was suddenly, acutely conscious of his muddy boots on the clean floor, of the lingering scent of whiskey on his breath. "Your family's worried." "My family sold me to the highest bidder," she replied, her voice carrying a sharp edge Mai's had never possessed. "Alastair Finch offered them shipping investments in exchange for a young wife. I decided I'd rather freeze to death in Wyoming than suffocate in San Francisco." Snow began to tap against the window panes, the soft, persistent sound of a storm that could last for days. "Storm's coming," Josiah said, stating the obvious. "I know," she said, closing the journal. "Mai wrote about Wyoming winters. How they could kill you if you weren't careful, or save you if you were brave enough to let them." What else had Mai told her sister about this place, about him? And why did looking at Leanne Wong feel like drowning and breathing all at the same time? She couldn't cook. She burned the eggs, oversalted the beans, and nearly set fire to the entire kitchen trying to manage the temperamental old wood stove. "City girl," Josiah muttered, cleaning up her latest disaster. I can learn, Leanne insisted, standing in the doorway. She was wearing one of Mai's aprons over her fine traveling dress, and the sight of it made something twist painfully in his chest. Mai learned, didn't she? Mai was different. He didn't answer how, couldn't find the words to explain that Mai had been like a gentle spring rain, while Leanne was summer lightning. He couldn't explain that Mai had fit into this rugged life as if she were born to it, while Leanne fought everything, the crushing isolation, the back-breaking work, the endless silence. But she was stubborn, fiercely determined. When he found her in the barn at dawn, fumbling to milk the cow with hands as soft as silk, something shifted inside him. Like this, he said, his voice low. He moved behind her, his large, calloused hands covering her own on the pail. He guided her with a touch that was gentle but firm. She smelled of jasmine and sheer willpower. When she leaned back against him, just for a moment, Josiah forgot how to breathe. There, she whispered as the first streams of warm milk hissed into the bucket. I did it. You did, he said, stepping away abruptly, before he did something they would both regret. The blizzard hit 3 days later, a maelstrom of wind that screamed like a banshee and snow that erased the world beyond the cabin walls. When it finally broke, Ethan found half his herd missing, scattered God knew where in the white hell outside. I'm going after them, he told Leanne, pulling on his heavy sheepskin coat. In this? You'll die out there. They're all I have left. But she was already reaching for Mai's old winter coat, her chin set in that determined line he was beginning to recognize. Then I'm coming with you. Like hell you are. You need help, she stated, her gaze unwavering. And I need to prove I belong here. Did she belong? And what would it cost them both to find out? They found the cattle huddled in a deep draw 2 miles south, half frozen but alive. By the time they drove them back to the barn, Leanne's lips were tinged with blue and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Josiah built up the fire and made strong coffee, lacing it heavily with whiskey. She sat wrapped in a pile of quilts, still trembling. Thank you, he said quietly, the words feeling inadequate. For what? For not giving up. She looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup, and for a fleeting moment, he saw not the ghost of his wife, but Leanne Wong, brave, stubborn, and beautiful in her own right. Is this what Mai felt? She asked, her voice soft. This, belonging. Mai never had to fight for it. Maybe that's why I need to stay. To fight for something Mai never had to. The words hung between them, thick and heavy as smoke from the fire. Josiah stood abruptly, retreating to the safety of distance. But that night, lying alone in his cold bed, he found himself listening for the sound of her breathing in the next room. He found himself wondering what it would feel like to not be alone anymore. When he heard her crying, soft, muffled sounds she thought he couldn't hear, it took every ounce of his willpower not to go to her. Some battles, he told himself, were meant to be fought alone. The strangers came on a Tuesday when Josiah was in town for supplies. Leanne saw them from the kitchen window, 2 men on horseback moving with the easy, predatory confidence of wolves. She had seen their type in the rougher parts of San Francisco, men who took what they wanted and damned the consequences. Mai's journal had mentioned them, drifters who preyed on isolated ranches, knowing help was hours, even days, away. She found the Winchester where Josiah kept it, mounted above the stone mantel. Her hands shook as she worked the lever, checking the chamber. 5 bullets. She had never fired a gun in her life. Hello, the house, the taller one called out, his voice carrying the false cheerfulness of a snake oil salesman. We're just looking for some water for our horses. Leanne stayed silent, her breath held tight in her chest, praying they would move on. They didn't. The front door exploded inward with a crash that sent splinters of wood flying across the room. The tall man stepped through the ruined doorway, tipping his hat like a gentleman caller. Now, that's more like it. A pretty little thing, all alone out here. His eyes moved over her like dirty hands. Where's your man, sweetheart? Gone, her voice came out steadier than she felt. Won't be back for hours. Perfect, the second man said, appearing behind him. He was shorter but meaner looking, with a jagged scar that ran from his ear to his mouth, pulling his lips into a permanent sneer. "We got time to get acquainted." The rifle felt impossibly heavy in her hands. "Stay back." "Or what?" the tall one laughed. "You gonna shoot us, little bird? You even know how to use that thing?" She raised the Winchester to her shoulder, mimicking the way she had seen Josiah do it. "I know enough." "I doubt that," he said, and lunged. The gun went off, deafeningly loud in the small cabin. The bullet splintered the door frame, mere inches from his head. Both men froze, staring at her in shock. "The next one goes in your chest," Leanne said, working the lever action the way she'd watched Josiah practice. "Your choice." For a heart-stopping moment, she thought they might leave. The tall one's eyes were calculating distances, odds, the noticeable tremor in her hands. Then he smiled, a cruel, knowing grin. "You got 4 shots left, little bird. Think you can get us both?" They separated, moving to flank her. Leanne backed away, swinging the heavy rifle between them. "Easy now," the scarred one crooned. "Nobody needs to get hurt. We just want to be friendly." "Real friendly," the tall one agreed, his hand moving toward his gun belt. Leanne fired again. The bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the wall hard, cursing in a stream of filth. 3 shots left, the scarred man snarled, pulling his own pistol. "Bitch! You shot Billy." "You should have left when you had the chance," but her hands were shaking violently now, adrenaline making her aim wild. The scarred man raised his gun, and Leanne knew with a chilling, crystal clarity that she was about to die. The cabin door, already hanging from one hinge, slammed open. Josiah Blackwood stepped through the opening like avenging thunder, his Colt already in his hand. His eyes took in the scene in one sweeping, cold glance. Leanne pressed against the table, the wounded man slumped against the wall, and the scarred stranger with his gun trained on her heart. "Drop it," he said. The 2 words were flat, final, the voice of a man who had killed before and would not hesitate to do so again. The scarred man hesitated for a fraction of a second. Josiah's gun boomed. The stranger's pistol flew from his grasp, taking 2 of his fingers with it. He screamed, a high, thin sound of agony, and fell to his knees, clutching his mangled hand. "Both of you, out!" "Now," Josiah commanded, his voice deadly calm. "Before I forget my manners." The wounded men scrambled for the door, the tall one leaving a trail of blood across Mai's clean floor. "If I ever see you on my land again," Josiah called after them, "I'll bury what's left." The sound of hoofbeats faded rapidly into the distance. Leanne stood frozen, the Winchester still clutched in her white-knuckled hands. The danger was over, but her body hadn't received the message yet. "Leanne," Josiah's voice was gentle now. He moved slowly toward her, like approaching a spooked horse. "You're safe." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the raw fear he was trying to hide behind his stoic expression, fear for her, fear of what might have happened. "I thought—" She started, then stopped, her legs giving out from under her. Josiah caught her before she hit the floor, gathering her against his broad chest. She could feel his heart hammering as fast and hard as her own. "You did good," he whispered into her hair. Mai's rifle in the hands of a Wong woman. Those bastards never stood a chance. She tilted her face up to look at him. They were close enough that she could count the fine lines etched around his eyes, see the first hints of silver in his dark hair. They were close enough that when he looked down at her, something electric and undeniable passed between them. This was the moment, the point of no return, and they both knew it. Josiah, his name on her lips was a breath, a plea, and it broke something inside him. 10 years of loneliness, 10 years of faithful grief, 10 years of telling himself that love was something he had already had and lost forever. But Leanne Wong was here, alive and warm and trembling in his arms, looking at him like he was salvation instead of damnation. He kissed her. It started gentle, a tentative brush of lips, a question asked and answered in silence. Then it deepened, becoming hungrier, fueled by a decade of want compressed into a single, breathtaking moment of surrender. She tasted of coffee and courage. her hands fisted in the rough fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer, and Josiah forgot everything except the impossible sweetness of not being alone. He backed her against the kitchen table, his mouth moving from her lips to the delicate curve of her neck. She gasped, her head falling back, and the sound went through him like whiskey and lightning. Leanne, his hands found the buttons of her dress, and she didn't stop him. If anything, she pulled him closer, her own fingers working at the buckle of his belt. This was madness. This was a betrayal. This was the most profoundly right thing he had felt in 10 years. Her dress slipped from her shoulders, revealing skin like cream and shadows. She stood before him in her chemise and petticoats, beautiful and brave and wanting him as much as he so clearly wanted her. Josiah's hands, calloused and shaking, reached for her, and stopped. His gaze had landed on the mantelpiece. Mai's wedding portrait watched them with serene, painted eyes. His wife. His first love. The woman who had died in this very room while he held her hand and promised to love her forever. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. "I can't," he choked out, stepping back as if burned. His breath came in ragged, painful gasps. "God help me, I can't." Leanne's face crumpled. "Josiah, this is Mai's house," he finished for her, his voice harsh with self-loathing. "Mai's room." Mai's? He couldn't finish, couldn't say the word husband because it would break them both. With shaking hands, she pulled her dress back up over her shoulders. "I understand." "Do you?" "No," she admitted, tears finally tracking silently down her cheeks. "But I should have known. I should have realized I could never compete with a ghost." She walked past him to the bedroom, her spine held straight and proud despite the tears. The door closed with a quiet click that sounded like the end of the world. Josiah stood alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of his carefully constructed control. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, the silence stretched like a deep, open wound. On the mantel, Mai's portrait smiled its eternal, placid smile. Some promises, he thought, were meant to last forever. But what happened when forever met the impossible, vibrant present? When duty collided with desire? When a dead woman's memory stood between two living, breathing hearts? By morning, Leanne was gone. The note was short, just 3 lines in her careful, elegant script. "Thank you for showing me what Mai found here. I'm sorry I couldn't be her. The train leaves Cheyenne at noon. L." Josiah read it twice, standing in the cold, empty kitchen. The coffee on the stove was cold, the fire had died to grey ashes. Even the air felt thinner, emptier, without her in it. He should let her go. He should count himself lucky that temptation was removing itself before he damned them both. Instead, he saddled his fastest horse. The road to Cheyenne stretched 37 miles across the windswept prairie. Josiah pushed the horse hard, its hooves eating up the frozen ground. In the distance, the faint, mournful cry of a train whistle echoed across the flats. It was distant, but getting closer. Too far. Too late. But he rode anyway, because some chances only came once. He rode because 10 years of faithful grief had taught him the crushing weight of words left unsaid. He rode because Leanne Wong deserved better than to be loved in her sister's shadow. The depot appeared through the morning haze, a small cluster of buildings beside the gleaming steel rails that connected Wyoming to everywhere else. The eastbound train sat on the tracks, breathing steam, as passengers climbed aboard for Denver, Chicago, New York, the world beyond the frontier. He saw her on the platform, a small, solitary figure in a traveling coat, clutching a carpet bag like an anchor. She was looking at the train with the expression of someone about to jump off a cliff. Josiah dismounted, his boots loud on the wooden platform as he walked toward her. She turned at the sound, and her face went through a dozen emotions in a single second: hope, fear, resignation, and something that might have been love. "You came," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The train whistle blew again, a long, final blast. "All aboard. Last call for the eastbound express." He was close enough now to see the tears she was fighting back, close enough to reach out and touch her face. He wanted to. A conductor walked the platform, calling out destinations. San Francisco. A world of banks and proper marriages and lives lived by other people's rules. The whistle screamed again. Steam hissed, and the great iron wheels began to slowly turn. He held out his hand. "Come home, Leanne." She looked at the moving train, then at his outstretched, calloused hand, and finally up at the vast Wyoming sky that promised nothing but wind and grass and the kind of love that grew slowly, like all good and lasting things did. She took his hand. The train pulled away from the station, carrying other people toward other lives. Josiah and Leanne stood on the platform, their fingers intertwined, watching it disappear into the distant horizon. She smiled, not Mai's gentle smile, but something entirely her own, bright and resilient. "It took me so long to realize," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I was never running from anything. I was running toward this." They walked back to where his horse waited, two small figures against an endless landscape. Above them, the Wyoming sky stretched out, blue and infinite, full of weather and unspoken possibility. Behind them, the train whistle faded, becoming nothing more than a memory. If this story touched your heart, drop a like and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. Also, do subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. Until next time, keep your hearts open to second chances and love in life.